I'm here chilling with Malcolm. He's one of the best cats ever. Love him. I'm also chilling with Avery. He is also one of the best cats ever. I give him a 10 out of 10. And I give this guy a 10 out of 10. And really all cats a 10 out of 10. As long as they're not ravenous murderer cats. We don't like that. What exactly is going on right now? What am I doing? Well, I'm watching a Papa Meat video right now. Stolen Valor, Thieves in Uniform. Because it's part of my habitual process, I would suppose, where I just wake up, I make myself a little brekkie fest. So in this case, I didn't make breakfast at all. I pretty much just grabbed some pastries that we had already on standby and threw those in a bowl and ate them. Well, I was drinking this coffee. And I go to work today from 12 to 9. I woke up at like 10:30. And I pretty much just been spending the morning chilling with my cats, eating pastries, and watching... Well, originally I watched a video of a guy talking about UFOs. I think his name was David Hoffman. Why UFO skeptics are getting nervous. And it was really interesting. Apparently he was a documentarian filmmaker during the 80s when he was filming for George H.W. Bush as vice president campaign with Ronald Reagan. They were gonna shoot an interview, but right before they did, apparently George H.W. Bush was like talking and with one of the sound engineers for the film, the documentary film, and apparently he said, he sadly didn't say it on the record, but someone did report back to the director of the documentary film, David Hoffman, saying George H.W. Bush said, you know those little green men? They're real. I've seen one dead. And yeah, why would a running vice president say something like that? That would severely throw his vice presidential campaign into question. You know, if people heard that, then they would probably say, why would I vote for such a crazy go-nuts guy? You know? Now, of course, this wasn't recorded, so it was just hearsay, but apparently they did legitimately hear that. The sound designer for the film did hear that and reported it back truthfully. So yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. Are aliens real? Or is it something else? Ultra-terrestrials? That would be kind of interesting. Could you imagine living beings that live amongst us that are like far more advanced than we are? But yeah, probably not real. There needs to be evidence for that. Definitely needs to be evidence for that. But what is it with all of these reports? Surely not everyone is making this up for attention, right? Oh, there goes Malcolm. Well, anyways, that's enough conspiracy theory brewing. I'm going to chat with you later. Hello, I go back to work in 5 minutes, so let's go over a briefing on what happened so far. I'm currently on my lunch break at home, and for the first 4 hours of work, what could I really say? I mean, the first hour was spent bagging, being friendly to the customers, and putting away any go-backs if needed. The second hour was spent pushing carts up back into the front corral of the store. There was one notable character during a lot. He left his phone in his basket, and he walked up to me and he asked, "Excuse me, I left my phone. I want my phone. Where's my phone?" I'm like, "Don't worry, sir. I'll ask our manager to see if someone put it in the lost and found." So I asked our manager. He said no. Then I asked each of the cashiers. They all said no. So that means that the phone must be somewhere in the store. Someone must have accidentally taken the cart where the phone was left in with them and was just pushing it around the store. And he was very sad about that. I did my best to look for any black carts around the parking lot area. I even asked people who had black carts if they saw a phone in their basket, to which all of them said no. But luckily, one of my coworkers managed to find the phone, and the guy was so happy and cheery, he did a little dance. He was like, yeah, it was pretty cool. Well, actually, no, he didn't do a dance. I just put that in there to see, to make it a little more interesting. But no, he was like, oh, thank you. And he took his phone and left. If that was me, I would have done a dance. Yeah, so that was the second hour. Then, for my first break, I went upstairs and did some breath work, which was very relaxing and nice. Then, the next 2 hours, the first hour was spent wiping windows down. But then I noticed there was a splinter in my thumb. So I realized I needed to do something about that. So I asked the CSR in the front of the store. I forget what the acronym CSR means, but basically it's someone who is in charge of all the courtesy clerks at the front. Knows where they are and all that good stuff. So I let them know that I needed to get this splinter out of my thumb, and they agreed. So I went in the back of the store where we have our first aid kit and sink, and I ran hot water all over that thumb for a good 5 minutes. Loosened it up and opened the pores enough where I could squeeze that sucker out. It took a little while, but I managed to do it. It was pretty tough, and I still feel some of the effects from it, but overall, not bad. Then the last hour before lunch was spent basically bagging. I did talk about my breathwork with one of the co-managers at the store, or key carrier. They thought that was interesting, and they said that when they went to therapy, they were taught how to do breath work, help calm themselves down and release any negative thoughts. And I said I was doing it because it was providing me some more deeper insight into my inner mental state, and I thought that was very interesting. Well, afterwards, I remember there was a customer who I greeted, and they asked me how I was doing. I was saying I was doing pretty good. And then after that, they asked what am I going to be doing after. And then I said, I'm going to be doing some breath work. Yeah, they were like, cool. Then punched out and drove home and had an amazing cheese sandwich with, it was made by our family friend who lives with us. It was perfectly crispified, buttery bread with cheese and spicy tomato sauce. Or spicy tomato soup. Yum. Love it. And yeah, I just finished that along with those weird, gross chips from yesterday, as well as some buttered up bread. And then I was watching a live stream with Simmy and Jimmy and Eggy Eggman Rodriguez playing a game called Binding of Isaac. And now I am recording this. And now I'm going back to work, and I'll let you know everything that happened between now and the end of the day. See you in a sec. Hey everybody. So, as you can see, I have quite a lot of laundry to do. And I thought, well, why not take out two birds with one stone and film my vlog while I do the laundry? I mean, seems pretty good to me. So let's do that. Alright, so let's think back to after I got home. Or, sorry, not got home. What I meant was got back to work. Now, what I remember when I returned to work is that usually during these days where I have co-closer duty, we normally have at least 3 co-workers who co-close with us. But during this particular during this particular closing thing, I don't know what you would call it, time, it would appear that, sadly, there is no third person. It was just me and another coworker. And the problem with having such a limited staff is that it puts more stress and burden to get more duties done in a shorter amount of time. Now, I think we had the third coworker that was supposed to help us with closing duties, but they called out after being at work for a little bit. So that meant we had to do our duties. It's pretty crazy, but it's all good. Yeah. And the thing was, I had to do like 3 different things. I had to multitask. So it wasn't just doing closing duties, but I had to bag, and I also had to take carts out and put them back into the corral. And the thing is, with something like closing duties, it usually depends. If getting those things done on time pretty much means you better hope and pray that there's not consistent customer going ons. And not that I have a problem with any of that. I enjoy working with the customers. It's one of my favorite things to do because I like interacting and maybe telling a few jokes here and there and just seeing their reaction to some said jokes, or maybe just giving them a nice smile that they wouldn't have had otherwise. You know, nice, sweet things like that, right? But when you're put under pressure, needing to clean 4 check stands, bring in receipt tape, which, by the way, we have receipt tape that we're supposed to put into the check stands that has coupons on it. The receipts on the coupons on the receipts. But those coupons were only available in the back alcohol room. And the thing was, that room requires a key to open, which I did not have, and would have asked one of the key managers for help, but by then I was already in the middle of using receipt tape that was completely blank that I found in the back of the store I work at. And so they just said, just use that one. So I was like, okay. And I mean, it worked out, but big issue is that, you know, I wasn't able to use the receipt tape I was supposed to. I guess next time I'll ask one of the key managers if they have the time to open the alcohol room door up so I can get the right receipt tape for next time. Okay, so what else happened? I mean, I was put in charge of lot duty for 2 straight hours, mostly because of one of the courtesy clerks called out earlier in the day. So that was a little crazy, but the thing was, I was able to clear it out for the first hour. The second hour, I had to do a lot of different closing duties, like refilling the cleaners and paper towels. There was enough paper towels, so I didn't refill the paper towels. There was like a water spill. I had to dry that water spill up. What else happened? Yeah, just jump back and forth. Yeah, I remember. I was wishing a coworker goodbye in the last video, if I remember correctly. Today was their actual last day. And there was a card being handed out around the workplace for each of us to sign for the coworker. So I decided to sign in, and while I was doing it, I was with one of my favorite coworkers. Well, I was coming up with something to say, and I don't exactly remember what I said in it because it was a bit short, and also it was like quick, and it was a bit of a while ago. But I remember trying to make it as genuine and thoughtful as I possibly could. It was pretty crazy because a coworker who left today had been working at the store for about a year and a half, and now that person is moving on to, from what I remember, being pulled to become someone in like a financial job of some kind. Something about finances or money related. I mean, I guess technically all jobs are money related if you just look at it in the most simplistic form, right? But that's what's going on. And yeah, good for the coworker, because good for them, because yeah, they'll probably get paid better and they'll be able to provide better for them and their family. So that's nice. Personally, it's not the kind of job I would choose because I'm more of a creative type and I enjoy being creative, and or at the very least trying to be creative and trying to be very expressive. That's why I make these videos on top of keeping myself accountable. But of course, the kind of work that I would like to get into is much more of a gamble. It's not a sure thing. A job that has to do with financial work is something that, you know, you could easily like make a decent living off of and then get very comfortable with working in that kind of environment and that living. And that's not the kind of life that I personally would like to choose. But yeah, everyone's different. And that's cool. So, yeah, what else happened today that was interesting? You know, was there any funny moments? Oh, there was one funny interaction. Hold on, I'm going to be out of the frame for a little bit. And that funny interaction was that there's this meme going on around the internet right now. It's pretty funny, where someone made like an AI thumbnail video. You know, there's this famous YouTuber, probably the most famous YouTuber online. He goes by the name Mr. Beast. And he usually makes videos where they do the most ridiculous challenges ever. And someone came up with the dumbest challenge of all time. Or, well, not of all time. Maybe there's a challenge that's even dumber. But it's just in the general sphere of dumbness. They made some rando on the internet made a thumbnail and a title that was like a crazy, scary-looking gorilla and 100 dudes, and the challenge was 100 men versus one gorilla. Who will win? And it had that Mr. Beast, you know, with that grin on his face, like in the thumbnail. Yeah. So that's pretty funny. What's going on in there. And I bring that up because I asked one of my coworkers about that, a cashier, older gentleman, and he thought the men would win. And then we asked a lady, customer, who came by, a lady who was like in her mid-50s, it looked like, who she thought would win, and she knew the meme, and she thought that the gorilla would win. Maybe 2 men might die. And it was pretty funny seeing everyone's reaction. We asked a few more customers, and the jury was pretty split, honestly. It was like half of them thought that the gorilla would win, and the other half thought that the 100 men would win. Personally, I think the 100 men would win. I mean, 100 of any animal versus one animal, you're bound to lose, right? There are power in numbers. I mean, sure, a gorilla might look big, large, intimidating, and scary, but I'm sure if enough men had that tenacity and willpower and were like beefed up enough to deal with something as scary as like gorilla, if it was willing to take someone out. Gorillas, I've heard, are actually very peaceful creatures. Like you don't bother them, they don't bother you, you know. But if a gorilla was threatened and did want to rip someone to shreds, they probably could with all that strength and that they look like they have. But yeah, I mean, pretty interesting reactions. Very funny reactions. I thought it was hilarious. Now, I was 20 minutes over time at my job, so when I punched out, I said goodbye to everyone. A nice smile, a little dance, and I went in my car, and I was looking through different videos to watch on YouTube. And one of the more interesting ones I came across was I tried different brain-altering things, and it was basically a guy who was talking about like things that you try to get an effect from your mind. And the reason why is because I never plan on doing anything that the person's discussing in the video. They were just describing it for educational purposes, and I was just curious about what the effects would be. And overall, the key takeaways: don't do any of the things that the person said, because they will mess you up in the long run. So that doesn't sound like my idea of a good time. Then I got into the house. There was delicious ribs waiting for me. Cooked by our family friend. Loved them. And I was eating freshly cooked beans and pork short ribs that were boiled, while watching a guy talk about how Disney has kind of lost its magic and isn't that once fun and interesting company that they used to be. Which is pretty sad, because I remember when I was growing up with Disney, they were always that fun and enjoyable, like, iconic company. But I think they started to just lose their identity when they launched that stupid streaming service, Disney Plus. And now, like, they feel like they need to make a profit on it because Netflix has proven you can make a profit. But from what I understand, I feel like, honestly, like, the reason why all these big corporations made their own streaming services was they saw Netflix become extremely successful, and they wanted a piece of that streaming pie, but they didn't realize why people enjoyed streaming to begin with. It's because in order to avoid things like piracy for like films or shows, you need to provide a service that is better than the pirates. At least that's a quote from a very famous video game developer, Gabe Newell. Basically, it's to say you need to provide a service that actually offers what the customer wants instead of lambasting the customer for not sticking to your dated systems that are inadequate to what the customer's seeking and looking for. And sadly, a lot of these big corporate entertainment entities don't really understand that or see that. They just see dollar signs and they think that that's the sign for a new venture and they go chase that. The problem is that they don't understand any of the downsides until they start smacking them in the face and it's too late. Like now, because they're dedicating all their energy towards streaming, it's basically fragmenting their brands. Like, for example, people would get excited for those Marvel movies back in the early to late 2010s or late 2000s to late 2010s, right? And a big reason for that was because everyone knew what was going on, because all you needed to do was go to the theater and watch the latest Marvel movie that came out in the cinema. And because the only way to stay updated with the story was to go to a theater, everyone was on the same page. But then Disney announces Disney Plus, and they realize they need content for Disney Plus, so they decide to make arbitrary, they decide to make television shows that explore other parts of the content that they have created over the course of a decade, specifically Marvel. And the thing is, they expect everyone who's a huge fan of Marvel to download Disney Plus and watch the Disney Plus shows, that any of the Marvel shows that have come out on Disney Plus. But the problem is that that's a completely different audience. That is not the same audience that you were chasing back in the late 2000s, early 2010s, who would just go have a fun time at the cinema and they'd go in for the next chapter a year or two later. And they had a good thing going. But now, because they're putting more expectations by basically asking their audience to do homework by watching 20 different streaming services to understand what the heck is going on when they release a new movie in the theater, it has caused severe fragmentation within the franchise and the fan base for that franchise. And ultimately what that means is that it has become more difficult to follow what the heck is going on, and thus it's become more difficult to get invested because you got to keep track of so much stuff. And all for the pursuit of trying to outdo Netflix as the lead streaming service and to make a profit. But the sad thing is that what they don't realize is that the reason why Netflix is so profitable is because they just make content that's intended for streaming, Whereas Disney is trying to retroactively take something that was meant for cinemas and then try to form it into something for streaming, and failing horribly because what they're making was never meant for streaming to begin with. And that's why it's not a good time for them. They even took a show that was intended for Disney Plus, the Moana TV show, and they turned it into Moana 2. And it's so obvious that it's a TV show that you could literally pinpoint when the episode ends and the new episode begins. It's practically kind of devaluing their own brand. It's such a shame too, because back in the day, you would always see stuff like Disney as the big tentpole release, like the thing everyone got excited about. Ooh, it's the new Marvel. It's the new Pixar. It's the new Star Wars. This means something. This is the thing that we're going to take the whole family to see and we're going to have a happy time. But now it's seen as a tarnished brand because there's just too much stuff that's being saturated in the streaming market that's confusing the consumer and making them less interested in pursuing your product because you want to become bigger than Netflix by taking your things that were never meant for streaming and forcing them to be streaming, and then no one cares. And that's sad. Like, it's a depressing state of affairs. I mean, that magic that sparked that excitement about like a new release just isn't there. It's hard to describe why. Could it be like just the times are changing? Could it be that they just lost their way and don't understand why people cared about them to begin with? It could be anything, but really, I just think that they just don't know who their audience is anymore, and their audience doesn't know who they are anymore. And so ultimately, we just have a no one wins situation where no one cares. And that kind of sucks, especially for today's like kids, which, you know, I'm sure nowadays a lot of kids are just having an iPad or a tablet thrown in their face, and the parent just auto plays like random YouTube content for them to consume that's just a bunch of bright colors and moving splotches on the screen, where there's no charm, there's no humanity. Like, yeah, I grew up with stuff that I'm not gonna pretend was art, like, or well, maybe not art, but I'm not gonna pretend like it was a masterpiece, is maybe a better way of putting it. Like, because anything that's made by a human being that, like, required some form of crafting or timing or dedication is art, bad or good. But anyways, so things I grew up with, like Charlie the Unicorn, Homestar Runner, Veggie Tales, what else? Chowder, things like that. Yeah, I'm not gonna say those are like the best things to ever be made in the history of human beings, but they had humanity in them. They had intent in them. As silly and corny as some of them were, they had that human touch, which I feel like a lot of the content, a lot of kids that parents are exposing them to unknowingly, and maybe this isn't like fair to say for all parents. I'm sure there's some parents who actually fact check what their kids are going to watch before they show them what they're going to watch, and they're responsible with showing them what they're going to see. But I think that might not be as big of a breed of parent as I would imagine. I mean, I'm not a parent, so I'm not here to say what you should or should do. Like I'm not telling you to do anything. I'm just saying like that the standards for entertainment were a bit like more finessey back then, and now as long as it has colors and it's moving on a screen, then that's good enough. And that setting such a low bar like that is doing all the people who are artists and spend their time working hard to make things that have meaning in the world, putting them out there, putting themselves out there, like it just kind of it's kind of a shame, because like the kids aren't growing up with that, they're just growing up with slop. And the sad thing is, not many of them will grow up with like actually well written stories that like they'll watch or be like, wow, that was so good, that I like that character, whoa, I could learn a thing or two from that was so meaningful to me. Instead, they're just gonna be like, whoa, bright color, whoa, a thing I recognize, whoa, isn't that cool? And I mean, at the end of the day, I guess you could make the argument that maybe entertainment isn't something a kid should be watching to begin with. Maybe a kid should just be outside, which, let's be real, that is 9 times out of 10 the most logical thing to do, because we weren't meant to be sitting on our butts looking at screens all the time. We're meant to be outside enjoying life, But that kind of puts a discount on, art that people do enjoy. So there needs to be sort of a balance of perspective and understanding, because when done right, you can look at art and it can speak to you and say something. And, that's the thing with a lot of the entertainment that comes out unregulated on YouTube. What was I even talking about? I kind of just spaghetti noodled off into an insane rant about like children's entertainment, and what was I even saying? I think I was talking about like Disney losing their way and like their target audience, which is kids, like not being there anymore. I was talking about like kids not even, their stand for entertainment seems to be lower now than it was back then, because back then you had to work to find the entertainment, and also the entertainment itself was a bit more well structured and meaningful in a storytelling perspective. But now literally anything will be thrown in front of a kid's face and they'll just accept it as law, and then they'll grow up to not really understand or appreciate what makes substantial good storytelling or culture anymore. And then I went off the rails. Anyways, basically I feel like Disney sucks right now and they need to get better. That's pretty much my point. I don't know what I was going on and on. Anyways, I think this video's gone on long enough. Yeah, after watching that, I threw away my my food that I didn't finish. I ate an entire bowl of beans and meats, but when it came, I wanted a second helping, but I also got rice that was in the fridge. That was all cold, and I microwaved that for a minute and then mixed beans in with it. But I don't know, I think the rice just didn't agree with my stomach because I immediately needed to use the restroom, and during that time I was watching like a video of a YouTuber talking about other YouTubers who are ranters, and kind of got caught in that whirlwind. And after that I was like, okay, it's time to record a new video. How should I approach this one? How about I fold my clothes and put it away while I talk to the camera? That seems like a good idea, and that's what I'm doing right now. Okay, well, that's enough ranting about Disney. That's enough recounting of the day. I think it is time to wind down. I'm going to finish putting away this clothes, and thanks for listening. Goodbye, everybody. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.